So tell me if this sounds like you or maybe someone that you know. A few weeks ago, I'm at the paddle courts, we've just finished a game, and I'm speaking to someone who is in sales. And as it so often does, the conversation ends up going to artificial intelligence. And so I ask him, how are you using AI in your role at the moment? And his answer to me is, I'm not. And to be honest, I'm baffled by this because this is someone who's very successful. And so my assumption about them is that they've always been quite adaptable through difficult times and through changing times. And yet here they are telling me that they aren't using one of the most disruptive technologies available to us today. And so I ask him, why are you not engaging with it? And he says it makes him anxious, that he prefers to just look away. And so this really got me thinking, what invisible force is strong enough that it can override someone's rational thinking and prevent them from making changes that they know they need to make? By the way, my name is Eric, and my job is to help leaders to adapt faster and lead smarter. And I do this by speaking on big conference stages and also spending time with leadership teams at offsites. To answer that, I want us to look at this Carnegie Mellon University study. So in the study, they looked at investors and they wanted to see what were they doing during times of market prosperity and during times of market downturn. And they found something quite interesting. So they looked at about 100,000 investors and they found that when things were going well, the investors were checking their accounts all the time. They lived and breathed the markets. But then the moment there was a downturn, up to 10% of them immediately stopped checking their accounts. And that's significant and interesting. But what's more interesting is that when they kept watching what they were doing and they were able to identify behavioral patterns in these investors, what they then found was that up to 79% of them exhibited something they call the ostrich effect, which is when people stick their heads in the sand in order to avoid looking at bad news. Now, these weren't amateur investors. These were professional, serious investors who knew that during market downturns, you can often find opportunity. And yet, here they were trying to close their eyes during the storm. One theory for why this might be happening to us is called the selfish brain effect. So essentially, we know that the human brain is the most energy hungry organ in the body. And during times of uncertainty and ambiguity, it requires even more energy in order to deal with the cognitive demands of reducing ambiguity and uncertainty. And so, what the brain does in these moments is it prioritizes itself. It is selfish. It hoards some of the energy in the body so it can do what it needs to do. This leads to an interesting scenario, though, where the brain might do a bit of calculus and it might go, well, to reduce the ambiguity is going to require quite a bit of energy. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be draining. And so instead of engaging with it, what if instead I didn't? And so we start avoiding uncertainty and ambiguity. And avoidance really becomes a cost saving strategy. Your brain in this moment is like a budget conscious CFO that's asking, should I invest into research and development or should I rather cut back on it? And we know that CFOs love cutting back on things. So, with this in mind, let's go back to my friend at the paddle courts. And all of a sudden, his behavior starts making a bit more sense because his brain is doing the exact same thing as what the brains of the investors were doing. He is making a calculation and going that it's going to consume a lot of energy, both emotionally and cognitively, for me to engage with this unknown, and therefore I'd rather just avoid it. This is something we do all the time. When faced with unknown, potentially threatening information, we decide to just look away instead. And if we are honest, we are all investors in our own lives. And when things don't go the way we want them to go, or when there's uncertainty, then we stop checking the accounts. And we do this all the time. When money is a bit tight in our bank accounts, we decide not to log in. When we are supposed to have a difficult conversation and we don't know what the outcome is going to be, we just ignore it. When we know that we have to go and get a health check because something isn't feeling quite right, we don't want to know what the outcome is going to be, and so we just put it off. But in all of these scenarios, avoidance in the moment might feel good, but it's going to cost you later on. And so the question we have to ask is, are we just a slave to how our brains are operating? Are we just a slave to the biology, or can we do something about it? And of course, the answer is yes, you can do something about it. In fact, there are three things I think you can do that's going to be highly effective. Number one, start with a small, clear first step. When we think of change, it often feels like this big homogeneous mess. And that is because when we are trying to make any sort of change, there are actually many small changes that need to occur in order to make the bigger change happen. And when you break it down, you can also see that there is a varying level of complexity within the changes you are trying to make. So, if we look at artificial intelligence, for example, a very easy and simple way of approaching it is downloading ChatGPT and asking it some prompts. Escalating all the way to, for example, working with AI agents where you are trying to chain things together. So it can feel very overwhelming. And the best way to get some momentum going is to identify a small and clear first step. Number two is to really time block uncertainty. No one walks around with dumbbells glued to their hands all day long, doing bicep curls as they go about their day. They contain their workout to a specific time in the day. They spend an hour lifting weights and then they go about their day again. And I think if you are in the state where you are avoiding change and ambiguity and uncertainty, then the best way to actually approach it is to dedicate some time in the day to it, where you are purposefully spending time with the things that make you feel uncomfortable. By doing this, you are actually helping yourself in two ways. One is that you are dealing with the uncertainty head on. You are sitting down with change and trying to learn something new in the process. But number two is that when you step outside of those sessions, you also aren't carrying the guilt of perpetually feeling like you aren't doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. And so it actually helps you in two ways. The third thing is that we have to train our brains to deal with discomfort. That you dealing with something now is much better than you trying to deal with it later on, because something that is small now becomes much bigger later on. So this is the best time to get involved in AI to try and understand it, because moving forward, it just gets bigger and more complicated, and you feel like you are so far behind that you can't catch up. The same thing with your health, with your wealth, with your relationships. It's always better to deal with it now because later on it's going to be much harder. Here's the line to share with your leaders and teams. In a world of uncertainty, the ultimate skill might just be our ability to keep looking and to engage when every instinct tells you to look away.